Where's Bruno Mars? Now it's been over 6 years since Bruno Mars has released a solo album, which begs the question, where is he? Before we find out what he's doing now, let's start all the way from the beginning. Let me get my notes out. Now Bruno Mars, lesser known as Peter Hernandez, his birth name, was a kid who grew up performing Elvis, Michael Jackson, and probably every other famous artist from the 20th century. As a singer, dancer, multi-instrumentalist, he got his first big break in 2004 when he was signed to Motown Records, the same label who signed Boyz II Men, the Jackson 5, and the Supremes. However, that big break didn't end up actually being that big because he was actually dropped within a year. Yikes. So after that, he met a dude called Philip Lawrence, who he'd actually end up building his career with. And together, they went hustling as music producers and songwriters, writing many famous songs before Bruno himself got famous. You know, hits such as Forget You by CeeLo Green, Bow Chicka Wow Wow by Mike Posner. And did you even know that he produced that World Cup song from 2010, Waving Flag? He's even in the music video and wearing glasses. Little did we all know. Now this was all before he became famous for his own music. So Bruno Mars actually ended up getting his first proper big break when he was featured on B.O.B.'s Nothing on You. You know the song, Nothing on You. As well as Travie McCoy's Billionaire, which is personally the song that I discovered him on, back when I was in elementary school. He sang the choruses for both of those songs, both of which blew up. He then began releasing his own music, starting from Just the Way You Are, then into Grenade, which instantly became hits. I think it would be safe to say that by this point, he was on the rise. So from there, he dropped his debut album, Doo-Wops and Hooligans, and even began touring it with Philip Lawrence and the rest of his band, The Hooligans. So he continued releasing singles off the album, such as The Lazy Song, which also became a hit. And he even released non-album singles such as It Will Rain, which was for the Twilight movies, which also became a hit. He was really unstoppable at this point. All of this success contributed to his continued growth, which set the stage for his next album, Unorthodox Jukebox. This album was released a little under 2 years after his first album, and this album did nothing but push the momentum that he was having with his first album, bringing him to even higher levels of success. It's actually crazy. The first single off the album, Locked Out of Heaven, instantly became one of his most successful songs ever. In fact, it was his most successful song for a long time. The same album produced a bunch of other Bruno classics such as When I Was Your Man and Treasure. The retro sound of this album really began to cement Bruno Mars as an artist that was able to bring the past into the present, if that's a good way of putting it. Because songs such as Treasure had 80s synth sounds, as well as a music video that had a VHS look to it. What was that? So at this point, he's gained more respect as an artist from both the older generations and the younger generations alike. He was very quickly becoming a household name. And get this, after less than 4 years as a published artist, he was invited to headline the Super Bowl halftime show, which is a stage reserved for the most respected artists in the industry. Artists with legacies to their name. This guy was a nobody just 4 years prior. Bruno only had 2 albums to show in his catalog before performing on this stage. And look, I don't know if this is a popular or unpopular opinion, but personally I think that his halftime show was amongst the most memorable and the most good. Hands down. I mean, if you look at it, if you watch it, it really shows, true artistry, to put it clichély. Because this performance proved to the world that he was not only a good singer, but also a good dancer and performer. Because, he went as far as do the splits on the stage, James Brown style. So at this point, many would assume that he has peaked his career after only 2 albums and a Super Bowl halftime show. However, crazily enough, this was just another step to his continued growth. Because later that same year, he ended up dropping his most successful song to date, Uptown Funk. This song and music video would not stop playing on the radio and TV and everywhere else for the longest time. As good as that song was, and I love that, I was addicted to that song. After a year, it gets a little tiring. But aside from performing the song here and there and, even performing on the Super Bowl a second time, performing this song with Beyonce, casual stuff for him at this point. He would stay out of the limelight for about the next year, prepping his next album, 24 Karat Magic. Now this album, which in my humble opinion is his best album and one of the best albums to ever be made. I am fanboying too much. This album continued his trajectory of making retro sounding music, from the excessive use of synthesizers, horns, and other analog instruments throughout the album. And he masters the retro sound even better in this album, because it actually sounds more authentic. You know, Bruno, along with his collaborators, you know, Philip Lawrence and all his producers, knew what they were doing. You know, tracks such as 24 Karat Magic, That's What I Like, Finesse were major hits to come out from this album. And he went off on his biggest tour, the 24 Karat Magic World Tour, you know, touring stadiums and arenas all throughout the world. I was lucky enough to attend one of the shows back in 2018. This tour actually allowed Bruno to befriend Anderson .Paak, who would open the shows for the first leg of this tour. Now, them two meeting is important for the rest of the story, for obvious reasons. So, after the tour ended and all the hype died out, Bruno would feature on a couple songs here and there, and then he would slowly, you know, step out of the limelight for a bit. And by this time, we're probably in around 2019, I think. By the time COVID began, there was no news of any new album coming soon. That is, until 2021, out of nowhere, he drops a new track under a new name, Silk Sonic. Silk Sonic. What's that? Was how a lot of people reacted when the announcement first came out. We would soon find out that Silk Sonic was a new duo comprising of Bruno and Anderson .Paak, joining forces. And by this point, everyone kind of knows Bruno as the staple retro sounding artist. So he continued that trend with this album, this time diving into the sounds of the 60s and 70s, keeping a consistent visual aesthetic and visual identity throughout all the album's tracks' music videos, as well as their wardrobe. So after many months of dropping that lead single, they finally released the album, An Evening with Silk Sonic, which was released in November 2021. And after dropping the album, they even did a Las Vegas residency. But then, you know, this Silk Sonic era hype also slowly died out over time, and Bruno has been quiet since. There's no news of any new solo music coming out, which, you know, a lot of people suspected that he would release an album last year, but he didn't. And this year, 2023, we're already a quarter into the year and there's still no inkling of any new music coming out, despite having been over 6 years since 24 Karat Magic, his previous solo album, having come out. This is the longest gap he's had between two albums. Over 6 years. However, hope is not lost. Because late last year, he performed a few standalone concerts, stadium standalone concerts in both Australia and Japan, and he's also performed a bunch of other, you know, here and there concerts in Saudi Arabia and even Bahrain of all places. And just recently, he's announced a couple more concerts like at random places throughout the world. I think there's one in Manila coming soon, which is exciting. Now this could mean that he's preparing to get back into the habit of touring with new music on the way. But that's just my theory. My music theory. Maybe. I don't know. So to answer the main question of this video, took me a little too long to get to this point. But to answer the main question of this video, he's still around, doing shows, selling out stadiums, but no sign of any new music anywhere. So we'll just have to wait and see if he announces any new solo music soon, or any music, even if it's with other people. I just want music. And if this old joke tweet from 10 years ago means anything, then we should be getting an album this year. Yeah, so that's where Bruno Mars is.